You know that feeling when you're like just absolutely pushing your body to its absolute limit? Like maybe you're sprinting to catch a departing train carrying heavy luggage and the doors are just about to close.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. Or, you know, maybe you're at the very end of a grueling high-intensity workout. Your lungs are burning, your legs feel like they're made of solid lead, and your brain is essentially just screaming at you to stop moving.
Yeah, your body is just begging you to quit.
Exactly. We've all hit that wall. But what if there was a way to push that wall just a little bit further back? And not with, you know, some experimental stimulant, but with something as seemingly simple as water.
It's a really universal human experience, right? Hitting that absolute physiological limit. And the premise of hacking that limit with water, I mean, it sounds almost too simple, doesn't it?
It really does.
But that exact question is driving some truly cutting-edge sports science research right now. We are moving past the traditional physical recovery methods and looking at interventions on a highly specific molecular level.
Right. And so today we are looking at a fascinating 2026 paper. And it's got an absolute mouthful of a title, so bear with me. It's titled Effects of Hydrogen-Rich Water Supplementation on Exercise Performance, Autonomic Nervous System Recovery, and Blood Lactate Concentration during repeated sprint exercise in male university athletes.
It is a very heavy title, I'll admit that.
It is.
But it was published in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine, authored by Zhihao Chen, Meilan, Ruizhi, Lianzhen, and Yupeng, Shen. And the core question they're asking here is actually quite brilliant.
How so?
Well, because it looks at a very specific, very grueling type of athletic demand.
Okay, I have to be honest with you right out of the gate, though. When I first saw the phrase hydrogen-rich water, my immediate thought was, wait, is this some late-night infomercial gimmick?
Right, like a fad diet thing?
Yeah. Like, are we talking about actual rigorous science here or just, you know, really expensive fizzy water? Because you see all sorts of crazy wellness trends out there online.
Oh, absolutely. And that skepticism is incredibly healthy. Frankly, it's necessary when you're evaluating any kind of sports supplement. But we are looking at rigorous academic science here.
Okay, good.
Yeah, hydrogen-rich water, or HRW, is simply water that has had molecular hydrogen gas dissolved into it through a process called electrolysis. And the researchers wanted to test this molecular intervention against a really specific challenge called repeated sprint ability, or RSA.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand why they use this specific water, we need to understand the problem they are actually trying to solve. When an athlete hits this wall during these repeated sprints,
like in soccer or rugby.
right, sports where you sprint, jog, and sprint again,
Yeah.
is it just their leg muscles running out of fuel, or is something else going on?
That is the key distinction right there. When you undergo that cycle of intense exertion and minimal rest, you're essentially facing a two-front war in your body.
The two-front war.
Yeah. So first you have peripheral fatigue. This is happening locally in the muscles themselves. You are rapidly depleting your immediate energy stores, like ATP, and metabolic byproducts are just building up in the tissue.
So that's the burning sensation in the quads, that physical heavy lead feeling.
Precisely. But the second front is central fatigue.
Which is what?
This is where your actual central nervous system, so your brain and spinal cord, starts to struggle. The neural drive, the actual electrical signals telling your muscles to contract forcefully, begins to weaken.
Oh, wow. So your brain is literally just sending a weaker signal.
Right. Your nervous system is overwhelmed by the stress and essentially tries to pull the emergency brake to protect the organism. And historically, we've tried to combat this massive systemic stress with passive methods, ice baths, massage therapy, or mild aerobic cooldowns.
But this research team wanted to see if drinking hydrogen gas infused into water could actively hack that fatigue. Like, could it fundamentally alter the body's autonomic nervous system recovery process? To really trust the results, though, we need to understand exactly how these researchers tested this.
Yeah.
Because, you can't just hand a guy a bottle of water, have him run some wind sprints, and say, hey, tell me if you feel faster.
No, you certainly cannot. And this is where the experimental blueprint is just so vital if we want to trust the data. They utilized a randomized, single-blind, placebo-controlled crossover study.
Okay, break that down for us. Who are they testing?
They recruited 13 healthy male university athletes. And we are talking about highly trained individuals here, rugby players, track and field athletes, soccer players, and basketball players, with an average age of about 24.
Got it. And that crossover design is so important. I like to think of it as Like a biological taste test.
Well, biological taste test, I like that.
Yeah, because the athletes did both trials, right? Like
Right.
1 week they did the protocol with the hydrogen water, and a week later they did the exact same protocol with the placebo.
Nice.
So they acted as their own control group. You completely eliminate the risk that one guy naturally just has, better cardiovascular stamina or a higher pain tolerance than everyone else, which would heavily skew the data.
That is a great way to frame it. The individual physiological differences are completely neutralized. The baseline for comparison is just the athlete's own body. So let's look at the protocol itself.
Right. How much water are we talking about?
The athletes were given 280 milliliters of either the placebo, which is just standard distilled water, or the hydrogen-rich water. And the HRW was electrolyzed to a very specific dissolved hydrogen concentration of 1,600 parts per billion.
Okay, so they drink the water, they rest for a few minutes, do a brief warm-up, and then the real test begins. And I gotta say, the test sounds like pure, unadulterated torture.
It's definitely not a casual workout.
No. They used a Monarch ergometer, which is this highly specialized stationary bike. The protocol is 7 sprints. Each sprint is 6 seconds of all-out, absolute maximum effort pedaling. And they're pedaling against a heavy load, specifically 0.075 kilograms per kilogram of their body weight.
Now, 6 seconds might not sound very long to someone listening.
Right. I mean, you can hold your breath for 6 seconds easily.
You can, but when you are outputting maximum explosive wattage against significant resistance, 6 seconds is an eternity.
I can imagine.
And the kicker is the rest period. They only get 30 seconds of passive rest between these maximum efforts. If you've ever tried a high-intensity interval workout, even remotely close to that, you know that by the 4th or 5th sprint, your power output usually just drops off a cliff.
You're basically pedaling through wet cement at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So to measure how bad that drop-off was, the researchers tracked a few key performance metrics. They looked at peak power, which is the absolute highest explosive output during a single sprint. They looked at average power across all 7 sprints, and they looked at the total work decrement.
And work decrement is essentially measuring how much their performance degraded from the first sprint to the last, right?
God.
Which brings us to the immediate question for you listening. Did the hydrogen water actually make them pedal harder? Did they turn into superhumans?
Well, what's fascinating here is the data reveals a very interesting nuance. The hydrogen-rich water did not magically increase their peak power.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it didn't give them a higher maximum explosive output on sprint number 1. But where it did shine, remarkably, was in sustaining performance over time.
Okay, so how much of a difference are we talking?
The athletes in the HRW trial demonstrated a significantly higher average power output across the entire protocol, and they had a significantly lower total work decrement and fatigue index.
So if I'm understanding this right, HRW doesn't give you a bigger engine. Like, it doesn't instantly turn a Honda Civic into a Ferrari.
Right.
It just stops your engine from losing horsepower as you do more and more sprints.
That is exactly the distinction the data makes. It is not a stimulant like caffeine might be. It's not giving you a sudden burst of superhuman strength for a single explosive movement.
Right.
Instead, it is supporting the maintenance of sustained power across repeated efforts. It is attenuating or, softening the blow of that cumulative fatigue that normally breaks an athlete down over the course of a demanding match or a grueling workout.
I mean, that alone is incredibly compelling for anyone involved in endurance or repeated sprint sports. But if we know they maintain their average power better, the next logical step is to look under the hood.
Right, we have to look at the physiology.
Yeah, what was actually happening in their blood and in their nervous systems to allow them to sustain that effort. Because they didn't just measure the bike's output, they measured the biological output.
Yes, and this is where we get into the metabolic and autonomic responses. This forms the core of why this paper is so interesting. Let's start with the metabolic side, blood lactate.
Okay.
So lactate is a metabolic byproduct that accumulates rapidly during anaerobic exercise, like a 6-second all-out sprint where your body can't use oxygen fast enough to create energy. The researchers measured blood lactate at multiple points.
And what did they find?
At 3 minutes post-exercise, the blood lactate concentration was approximately 1 millimole per liter lower in the hydrogen-rich water trial compared to the placebo trial.
Wow, that is a very significant drop for such a short window of time.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just the blood that was recovering faster, right? It was the nervous system itself.
Yeah.
And this is the part I find absolutely fascinating.
Yes, the HRV data.
Exactly. They measured nervous system recovery using heart rate variability, or HRV. Now, for someone who might only know their basic heart rate, like they just know my heart beats 60 times a minute, Could you explain how HRV is different and why it's a better window into the nervous system?
Gladly. Your basic heart rate just tells you how many times your heart beats in a minute, but your heart doesn't beat like a perfect metronome.
Okay.
There are tiny microscopic variations in the time between each individual beat. That variation is your heart rate variability. HRV is a brilliant, non-invasive window into the autonomic nervous system, or ANS.
And that system manages the automatic stuff.
Right, it manages all your unconscious bodily functions, and it has two main branches.
The sympathetic and the parasympathetic.
Exactly. The sympathetic branch is your fight or flight stress response. When that is dominant, your heart beats faster and with very little variability. It's like a metronome, highly rigid, preparing for danger.
Makes sense.
But the parasympathetic branch is your rest and digest recovery system. It acts like a brake pedal on the heart. When the parasympathetic system is engaged, the time between heartbeats constantly fluctuates slightly as you breathe in and out.
So a higher HRV is actually a good thing.
Yes. A higher HRV generally means your parasympathetic system is successfully applying the brakes, your body is adaptable, and you are recovering.
And the data from the study was super clear on this. They looked at a metric called RMSSD, which specifically reflects that parasympathetic brake pedal activity.
Right, the short-term variation.
Yeah. And in the first 5 minutes after the massive stress of the exercise, the RMSSD was significantly higher for the athletes who drank the hydrogen water. Their brakes were basically working better.
They also looked at the LFHF ratio. This is a frequency domain metric comparing low frequency to high frequency heart rate variability. Think of it as a balance scale between the sympathetic stress response and the parasympathetic recovery response.
Okay, a balance scale.
Yeah. A lower ratio usually indicates a shift back toward parasympathetic dominance, meaning the body is calming down. And at 10 minutes post-exercise, that LFHF ratio was significantly lower in the HRW trial.
Hold on, though. The paper also mentions they saw improvements in nonlinear metrics like sample entropy and DFA alpha 1. I have to stop you there because sample entropy sounds like quantum physics or audio engineering, not sports science.
It really does.
What does that actually mean for the guy who just finished pedaling the bike?
It does sound like physics, and in a way, it is the physics of the heart. Sample entropy measures the unpredictability or complexity of the heart rate signal. In biological systems, a highly predictable, perfectly repeating pattern often indicates a system under extreme stress or pathology. It's locked in.
Ah, I see.
High entropy or high complexity means the cardiovascular system is flexible, adaptable, and responding well to a complex environment. The hydrogen-water group showed a faster return to this complex, adaptable state.
So all of these metrics, the RMSSD, the LFHF, sample entropy, they all just point to one thing.
Yes. The autonomic nervous system was returning to a state of equilibrium and recovery much faster.
Okay, so what is clear? HRV goes up, lactate goes down. But the how is what I really want to understand. Why does drinking hydrogen gas dissolved in water make your nervous system recover faster and your blood lactate drop?
That's the big question.
Because it's not like hydrogen's a fuel that goes into the muscle and literally eats the lactate.
You're right. Molecular hydrogen is not a metabolic substrate. It doesn't bind to lactate and carry it away. It doesn't provide calories or direct energy.
Then what is it doing?
Its primary proposed mechanism is acting as a highly selective therapeutic antioxidant.
Selective antioxidant. Okay, let's break that down.
During intense exercise, your body demands massive amounts of oxygen to create energy. This process produces a massive amount of oxidative stress as a byproduct, specifically creating something called cytotoxic hydroxyl radicals.
Which are basically the cellular exhaust fumes that damage your muscles, right?
That is a perfect way to visualize it. They are highly damaging free radicals that attack your cells. But hydrogen has this unique property. It selectively scavenges these specific harmful radicals without interfering with other beneficial reactive oxygen species that your body actually needs for normal cellular signaling.
Oh, so it only targets the bad stuff.
Exactly. By scavenging these toxic exhaust fumes, the hydrogen protects the mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of your cells. When your mitochondria are protected from that oxidative damage, they preserve their efficiency.
I see. So it's kind of like clearing debris off a racetrack.
I love that analogy.
Like the hydrogen doesn't make the cars, which in this case are your body's energy production systems, inherently faster. It just removes all the microscopic roadblocks, those free radicals.
Precisely.
And because the cellular environment is cleaner, The body's natural lactate shuttling systems can drive at full speed. They can clear the lactate faster simply because the machinery isn't gummed up with oxidative stress.
You've nailed it.
And because there is less localized cellular damage and inflammation, the rest and digest nervous system isn't getting constant alarm signals.
Yeah.
So it can just take the wheel much sooner.
The physiological logic flows exactly as you described. The hydrogen is clearing the oxidative noise, allowing the autonomic nervous system to hear the signals to calm down and recover, rather than, constantly fighting localized fires in the muscle tissue.
But here's where it gets really interesting, and where the research takes a bit of a surprising turn.
Yeah, the subjective data.
Right, because if the body is objectively performing better on the bike, if the blood lactate is lower, and the nervous system is measurably recovering faster on the HRV monitors, did the athletes actually feel better? Did they realize they were experiencing less fatigue?
This brings us to the great paradox of this study. The researchers didn't just rely on objective sensors, they measured subjective fatigue using the RPE scale, the rating of perceived exertion.
Right, where you rate how hard it feels.
Exactly. After every single sprint, the athletes had to subjectively rate how exhausted they felt on a numerical scale. They also attempted to measure central nervous system fatigue, that brain fatigue we talked about earlier, using something called critical flicker fusion frequency, or CFF.
Wait, flickering lights. How does staring at a flickering light measure how tired your brain is after a sprint?
It is actually a deeply established tool in cognitive science. CFF measures the exact frequency at which a rapidly flickering light appears to become a steady, continuous beam of light to the human eye.
Sort of like how a movie is just a bunch of still frames moving quickly, but our brain blends them together.
Exactly like that. It requires a lot of cognitive processing power and central nervous system arousal to detect the individual flickers at high speeds.
Okay, I follow.
Think of your brain as a computer processor. When it's fresh, it can process 60 frames per second easily, and you can see the flicker. When your central nervous system is heavily fatigued, your brain's processing speed slows down. Your internal frame rate drops. When that happens, the light will appear steady to you at a much lower frequency. So it is an objective proxy for subjective brain fatigue.
So they are measuring how brutally hard the workout felt with RPE, and they're measuring how tired their brains were using this CPU frame rate test.
Yeah.
What were the results? Did the hydrogen water protect their brains and their perception of pain?
There was absolutely no significant difference between the hydrogen water trial and the placebo trial in either metric.
Really? None?
None. The athletes felt just as miserable, just as physically exhausted subjectively, and their central nervous system fatigue, as measured by the CFF light test, showed no difference whatsoever.
The mind-body disconnect here is wild. I mean, if their HRV is clearly recovering faster and their lactate is objectively lower, why do they still feel just as miserable?
Well, there are a few scientific explanations for this disconnect. First, regarding the perceived exertion, we have to remember the context. The physical effort was still maximal. They were still pedaling as hard as humanly possible against heavy resistance for 7 brutal rounds. Hydrogen water doesn't numb pain receptors. It doesn't lower the absolute physical demand of maximum exertion. It just helps the cellular machinery recover from it faster in the background.
Right.
So the pain of pushing to your absolute limit is still going to register as a 10 out of 10 in your conscious mind.
That makes sense. Pain is pain. But what about the brain fatigue? Why did the flickering light test show an improvement if the central nervous system is supposedly being protected by the antioxidants?
The researchers themselves suggest that the CFF test might simply not be sensitive enough to detect central fatigue in a workout that is so intensely brief.
Because it was only 7 sprints.
Right. Remember, the entire sprint protocol, including those 30-second rest periods, only lasts about 7 minutes total.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's fast.
That is a massive metabolic stress on the muscular and cardiovascular systems, but 7 minutes might not be a long enough duration to deeply drain the central nervous system in a way that actually alters cognitive processing speeds.
Interesting.
It raises a fascinating question of whether hydrogen water's immediate benefits in this specific context are purely peripheral, meaning localized in the body, the muscles, the cellular environment, rather than central in the brain.
This raises an important point, though, about what we don't know yet and how to critically read a scientific paper. Because every study has its boundaries, right? This isn't the final word on hydrogen water.
Absolutely not. And to their credit, the researchers are very transparent about the limitations of their work. First and foremost, the sample size was small, only 13 athletes.
which makes a big difference.
It does. In statistical terms, that limits the power of the study, meaning they might have missed smaller secondary benefits simply because they didn't have enough data points to separate the signal from the noise.
Second, it was a single-blind study. The athletes didn't know if they were drinking the hydrogen water or the placebo, which is great. But the researchers preparing the water and running the tests did know.
Yes, they did.
And, human nature being what it is, that always introduces a slight risk of observational bias, even unconsciously.
Furthermore, they only tested young, healthy, male university athletes. We cannot automatically assume that a 45-year-old female marathon runner or, a 60-year-old man recovering from surgery would have the exact same physiological response to hydrogen water. The baseline physiology is just too different.
Plus, while they measured the results of oxidative stress recovery via the HRV monitors and the blood lactate tests, they didn't actually draw blood to measure the free radicals directly.
That is a crucial nuance. There were no direct biomarkers of oxidative stress measured in this specific study, like malondialdehyde, which is a common marker for lipid peroxidation.
This is an assumption.
Well, the mechanism we discuss, the hydrogen scavenging the toxic hydroxyl radicals, while highly probable and based on a wealth of existing literature on molecular hydrogen, is still technically an educated inference within the specific context of this 7-sprint protocol.
But even with those limitations, you have to admit, the objective data on the maintenance of average power output and the rapid rebound of heart rate variability is incredibly compelling. It really makes you look at a glass of water differently.
It is compelling. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this study shifts how we typically think about physiological recovery. We usually view recovery as a passive state that happens only after the workout or the stressful event is entirely over.
Right. You finish your sprints, you cool down, you stretch, you eat protein.
Exactly. But this research suggests that preloading with a targeted, specialized antioxidant like molecular hydrogen can actively protect the autonomic nervous system during the stress event itself. You are essentially armoring your cellular mitochondria against the stress before the stress even begins.
So what does this all mean for you listening? For me, the most fascinating takeaway goes way beyond just optimizing sports performance. Think about like a high-pressure work presentation or navigating a profoundly stressful life event. Your heart is pounding, your sympathetic nervous system is in overdrive, and your body is producing oxidative stress.
It's all the same physiological response.
Exactly. If a simple odorless gas dissolved in water can act as a biological signal to protect our nervous system from oxidative noise and accelerate our return to a resting state, it really makes you wonder, what other passive environmental inputs are constantly shaping our body's baseline resilience without us even knowing?
It's a huge question.
Are there other simple molecular interactions happening around us every day that quietly dictate how we handle the physical and mental stress of modern life?
That is exactly the kind of profound question this research inspires. It blurs the line between basic nutrition, environmental exposure, and complex cellular biology. It shows us that our autonomic nervous system isn't just reacting to big conscious events, it is constantly listening and reacting to the microscopic molecular environment we provide it.
To truly grasp the rigorous methodology, the nuances of the complex crossover design, and the specific physiological metrics we discussed today, we highly encourage you to read the full article. It is an excellent example of modern sports science.
I agree. The depth of the data on heart rate variability alone is well worth exploring if you have any interest in human physiology and how our bodies manage stress.
And if you want to keep exploring the cutting edge of human performance, cellular biology, and science with us, make sure to follow the channel and turn on notifications for similar content. Keep questioning the baseline. Keep exploring the mechanisms behind the headlines, and we will see you on the next deep dive.